All right, so we just picked up Grandpa's quad. He had an issue where it was leaking gas all underneath it, leaving a puddle. So I wanted to go through our checklist of what to look for when you have an issue with the carb. The first thing you want to check is the drain hose, because that's going to be the most likely thing. So here's the drain hose that connects to the bowl, and see if it's wet underneath or at the very bottom. You can see it's kind of wet, so that's a good indicator that the needle and seat is not functioning properly. So we'll go ahead and pull the carb to do this. And when we're pulling the carb, you always want to take good pictures of where all the hoses are routed and how everything's kind of sits in here. And then as well as taking pictures of how everything's routed, you want to locate the petcock and turn it to the off position. While the petcock is turned off, we'll go ahead and drain the bowl on the carb, so when we pull it, it doesn't make as big of a mess. Screw for the draining the bowl is at the very bottom of the carb. And that way when you pull the carb, gas isn't leaking everywhere as you remove it from your quad.
There you go.
All right, so we got the carb on the bench. We got it upside down. So we're looking at the bowl up top. And then here is the overflow or drain hose that we were talking about earlier. And if you're curious what this is, on the drain hose, this is a check valve, so gas can go out, but water can not go in. If you're submerge your quad in some deep water, this prevents water from getting into the bowl. We're going to go ahead and pull the bowl and check the seals. And when diving into the carb, we always like to use screw gripper, or valve grinding compound is what it's also called. And we use JIS screwdrivers because they have a better fit for most carbs to alleviate any risk of stripping the screw head. And a lot of times the screws are pretty tight on there. And then the symptoms that we were showing with the quad, we just went ahead and ordered a gasket kit for the bottom of the carb and a needle to replace the needle that was original to the quad. And when doing so, we always like to go with original parts or OEM parts. You can get them a lot cheaper on Amazon, but we don't want to dive back into this problem a couple years down the road or even sooner. So we're going to try and alleviate that with OEM parts. That O-ring's pretty flattened out. Now we're applying grease to the seal just to keep it in place. Makes it easier when you're putting stuff back together. Now we're removing the float to get access to the needle. But you want to be careful when you're removing the float, the rod that holds the float in place. You want to be very gentle when you're hitting it with a hammer with the punch. That way you don't break off one of the legs, and then that would definitely require you to need a new carb. Just make it more time consuming to fix.
Yeah.
Now in this particular carb, we found from looking at the parts breakdown that the seat is non-replaceable. There's a lot of good parts diagrams that you can view on all the different parts on your quads at Rocky Mountain ATV or Partzilla.com. I'll link those in the description. But on this particular carb, we found that you can't replace that piece. So we're just going to be replacing the needle today. And usually a good indicator of this issue is the needle being gummed up, or you can see some visual wear on the needle itself. This one does have a slight wear spot, but we're going to go ahead and replace it. Alright, so we went ahead and put the new needle in and got the float reattached. This is generally what the most common issue is with the carbs when they're leaking gas. But we did go ahead and replace the seal around the bowl because there was also a wet spot around the seal of the bowl. So to alleviate any potential of that being a problem as well, we went ahead and replaced it. But overall, usually it is almost always the needle. And if it's not the needle, then sometimes it's the seat. So always check that. On the previous carb that we worked on, the last one that we worked on, it was actually the seat. The seal on that was bad, so once we replaced that, the quad ran great and didn't have any issues. So you just got to kind of really inspect it when you're in there and just be careful, keep your area clean. And while carbs aren't generally too fun to work on, as long as you have a general understanding of how they work, they're not too scary to dive into. But just thought it'd be fun to show how we fixed this carb on my grandpa's Rincon. But I appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.